on the Jacob Buehrer Show. I am so excited to have on one of the best quarterbacks ever, in my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinion, Mr. Joe Theismann. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Jacob. It's good to join you on your show.
Well, first off, I appreciate you coming on. It means a lot to me, especially since I cheer for Notre Dame on the side, even though I go to Purdue. So can't say the same about Washington, but I am a Colts fan when it comes to the NFL. Take us through a little bit. You're from New Jersey. I was just watching a documentary before you actually got on a little over an hour ago as I was working on some homework. And you actually played in high school with um, somebody who turned out to be a wide receiver themselves in the pros for the Cowboys.
Yep.
So you came from a small town in New Jersey. Take us through how you kind of got started in football. It's really interesting.
Well, it's actually the wide receiver. I'll sort of take away the suspense right now for everybody. It was Drew Pearson.
Yep, Drew
Drew,
Pearson.
Drew was my wide receiver in high school, but my mother wouldn't let me play football when I was 10. She wouldn't let me play when I was 11. And then one of my best friends, a guy by the name of Tommy Barra, who went on to be a 25-year career FBI agent. Tommy at that time came to the house dressed in his uniform. He walked up, knocked on the door, and at that time we were called Theismann. So he said, Mrs. Theismann, this is what we wear for football. Joey's not going to get hurt. He's going to be fine. We'd like to have him play football. And my mother relented. And so I started playing football when I was 12. I started playing baseball when I was 6. But it was Tommy came there and sold my mother based upon the uniform that I was wearing, and then had a wonderful, wonderful time in high school. I lived 2 blocks from my high school, Jacob, and it was the best scenario I could possibly have. I'd walk out my front door, make a right-hand turn. 2 blocks away, there was a football field, a baseball diamond, tennis courts, basketball courts. We used to play stickball against the school wall. I mean, everything you could possibly imagine as a kid in sports was right there at my fingertips, just, like I say, 2 blocks away.
Wow, and I can kind of simulate. I grew up in a town of about 2,000 where I could see the football field from across 2 cornfields. So
Yeah, about that distance.
yeah, although I didn't play football. So what made you then want to pursue football over baseball? You were an athlete, so you must have been pretty good at baseball. In the documentary, you played a couple different positions. So what made you end up sticking with football over baseball in the end? Because of course,
Well,
at the age of 10 or 12, everybody's playing football is also playing basketball or baseball. I wasn't. I was doing cross country and soccer, but everybody else who was playing football was into baseball and basketball. So how did you pursue football
well, we
as the
really
main
didn't
sport?
we really didn't have soccer per se when I was growing up. It was really the 4 sports. You had track, baseball, football, and basketball. Those were the sports that you participated in. And for me, I loved baseball. Like I said, I played baseball, had a trial with the Pirates when I was in high school, got drafted by the Twins when I came out of college in 71. And I really, really loved playing baseball. I love watching. As a matter of fact, as we are sitting here speaking on my television in the other room is the Rangers and the Rays are playing right now. So, I'm still a baseball junkie, but as I got into college, I played 7 games in college, of which you can't find any record of, but I actually did, other than a box score. And then I had to go to spring football practice my senior year. But I didn't play my sophomore or junior year. I played my senior year a little bit. And then when it came to making a decision of what direction I was going to go in, I felt like if I chose football, if I was going to make it, I was going to make it pretty much in a hurry. In baseball, it's a long road. I was going to wind up in AA ball and then AAA and then on to the bigs, hopefully. So you go through this process. And in football, you got a pretty good idea what's going to happen right away. And when I got involved in football and, I put my heart and soul into it, and I guess you could say it turned out okay for me.
For sure. And then what was it like playing at Notre Dame? Notre Dame's still very great to this day, but back in the 70s, your coach went on in high school to be an assistant at NC State. But when you went to Notre Dame and you got back in New Jersey, you told your dad, I'm going to Notre Dame. That's what you did if you got an offer there. It'd be like getting an offer at Alabama today. So what was it like playing at Notre Dame? Do you have a favorite game?
Well, yeah, I actually signed at North Carolina State. 5 schools really I went to visit: Wake Forest, UNC, North Carolina State, Penn State, Notre Dame were the 4. I'd visited 4, but I did not visit Notre Dame at that time. And I made a commitment to go to North Carolina State because my high school baseball coach or football coach, guy by the name of Ron Wojcicki, backed up Roman Gabriel, who young people are probably gonna have to Google to figure out who he is, but he was a quarterback for the Rams as well as at NC State. I thought, hey, that's a good reason to go to college. And then I made a trip out to Notre Dame. And when I got off the plane, my dad said, what do you think? I said, I have to go to Notre Dame. He said, why? I said, Dad, it just feels right. And Jacob, I contend this, that if we followed our gut more than we followed all the analytics in our lives, we'd probably be a little bit better off in time. It's just that the gut has an idea what's going on for you. It's, no definition for it, no explanation for it. It's just the way it is. And so when I wound up going to the University of Notre Dame, there was one of 13 quarterbacks my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I returned punts my first 7 games of my sophomore year. And then Terry Hanratty, who was a Heisman Trophy candidate at that time, was the quarterback. He got hurt, and I played the last 3 games. And Ara Parsegian had 2 guys that were seniors. Coley O'Brien, as a matter of fact, quarterback Notre Dame to a national championship in '66. But he chose me. And I asked him at his 90th birthday, why? And he said, I just thought you were ready. And I've been so blessed to have people have confidence in me to be able to put me in situations where I had a chance to be able to do the things I love.
Absolutely. And of course, you won a bowl game at Notre Dame, and then you went on to the pros, started at Miami. And we won't talk too much about that, of course, but what was it like that first time, you were down practicing in the NFL? Like, what would you say the main differences between practicing in the NFL and college football, at least in that era? What was the big difference that first time?
First of all, when I graduated from college, I chose not to go to Miami. I was drafted by them, but I wound up going to the Canadian Football League and
For
played
9
for the
years.
Argonauts, and absolutely loved it up there for 3 years. And then George Allen traded a number 1 pick to Miami for my rights, and I came to Washington. Once again, I got here in '74, and in '74 and '75, I was a punt returner. I mean, I did it in college, and I started my career in the NFL that way as well. But it's the speed of the game, the size of the players, and usually you look at a college football game and you're going to isolate probably 3, maybe 4 players that are probably the best players on the field. When you get to the professional level, all those guys that were the best players on the field at the collegiate level, all of them are now in professional football. So the competition level goes up quite appreciably. And so it's the speed of the game and the size. And, we sometimes live our lives through validation. And when I was in high school, we used to compete against New Brunswick High School. They were a great football team, and we were one at South River. And if I could play well against them, I felt like I belonged. And then when I went to the University of Notre Dame, it was USC was the barometer. And if I competed well, then okay, I belonged. And then when I got to professional football in the NFL, it became the Dallas Cowboys. They were a great organization, great football team. Tom Landry and that whole bunch were incredible. And if I could play well against them, then I felt like I belonged. I think quite often in our lives, we look for ways to validate ourselves in certain positions. And for me, it was the competition I had a chance to play against. But it was the speed and size of the game that was appreciably different, and the complexity of defenses.
Interesting. And I think what's really interesting about you is, so often we hear about quarterbacks today, like CJ Stroud came out after 1 or 2 years in college. Your journey was so much different. You were a punt returner. You went up to Canada for a couple of years, and that's what's really interesting about you, and you ended up winning a Super Bowl. What's that feeling like? Of course, there's so many great athletes out there, but so few ever make it to Super Bowl. It's like being the nominee on a presidential level in politics. What's it like? What's that experience like?
It's almost undescribable, or indescribable.
Do you sleep much the night before? I do wonder. Did you?
I never slept really well the night before any game, and the Super Bowl was no difference. As a matter of fact, I spent almost 2 hours on the phone with a good friend of mine by the name of Burt Reynolds, because we were playing in Pasadena, California, and Buddy and I talked for like 2 hours, and I got up real early in the morning because obviously it's on the West Coast. You're playing, it's a little bit later in the day, 3:30, which is not unusual nowadays, but have later games was a little more unusual back then. And so, I got myself ready to play football. I felt like we were ready. We had a great meeting the night before, the quarterbacks and, of course, Coach Gibbs, and the things we wanted to do. It was really funny. We have different packages that everybody uses: 2 tight ends, 3 wides, all that kind of stuff in football. And we had a particular package. We called it an explode package, where everybody would line up in a different position. Art Monk would be in the backfield. John Riggins would be on the wing. Gary Clark would be someplace else, or Alvin Garrett. And then when I get to the line of scrimmage, I'd go, hut, and everybody would explode to the positions they were supposed to be in. So we're sitting in the meeting before the game on Saturday night, and Coach says, we're going to use the explode package. He said, I want to use it. He said, I don't know whether we're going to get the situation we want, but I'm absolutely going to use it because I want to hear what the announcers have to say when we do this. And so it's a little bit like Andy Reid. When you look at some of the configurations that Andy has come up with, and Doug Peterson is another one in Jacksonville, they get extremely creative with the way they want to present plays and the things that really keeps the player interested. If you do the same thing over and over and over and over again, it becomes mundane and you lose your focus. But if Coach throws something unique in, you can't wait till Sunday because you want to see what it looks like against the other guys. And that's basically what Joe did the night before. But to be able to hoist a Super Bowl trophy, to be able to be world champions is, something you dream of as a kid. And the closer you get to it, the more you fight back that I got to have it kind of feeling. I've gotten this close because I experienced that the year after when we lost one. And how devastating it is to lose one. You go so far and you get so close, and all of a sudden it's gone. And believe me, as so many guys have seen, there's no guarantees in this business that you're going to have a shot at another one if you get there.
Interesting, and that's a very good point. And you were able to make it and win then. And then kind of one last football question. Then I'm going to ask you actually a golf question because you're a big golfer too. And everyone knows about the hits. I'm not going to ask you about that. I know you had a lot of interviews a couple of weeks ago with the Aaron Rodgers thing. So I'm not going to ask you about, the injury too much. Everyone knows about it already, and it's probably annoying to you at this point. But you've been able to become friends, and you met up with the guy who ended up hitting you. Why can't I think of his name? I feel so bad.
Lawrence Taylor?
Yep. Giants. So how were you able to maintain a good friendship after that, if you don't mind me asking, or a good bond where you can still get together? And I think this is an important thing for athletes to hear. That's why I'm asking this, if you don't mind.
Lawrence was the best outside linebacker in the history of the game of football. Now, people have come by and they tried to compare him to him, but he's the greatest outside linebacker at this stage that I've ever seen in football. Micah Parsons in Dallas is a terrific young football player, but Lawrence did it for a lot of years. And he never, I think that you develop respect for the guys on the other side of the ball. They want to hit you hard. You want to beat them bad. And that's something that, it's ingrained in us. And if you're a big competitor, if you enjoy the competition, you want it against the best. And when LT took me down, he was visibly upset. We've remained in conversation and friends over all these years. If anybody has ever seen the video, it's only been viewed by about 30 million or 40 million people. I don't recommend it, but Lawrence was extremely upset, and he called me. I'll tell you a true story. 2 stories about Lawrence and I. So Tuesday morning, I was hurt on a Monday night. Tuesday morning, nurse comes walking into my room after they put my leg back together, and she said, "Mr. Theismann, Mr. Taylor's on the phone. Would you like to speak to him?" I said, "Yes, I would." She hands me the phone. I said, "LT, is that you?" He said, "Yeah, Joe, how you doing?" I said, "Not very well." He says, "Why?" I said, "Why? You broke both bones in my leg, for crying out loud." He says, "Joe, you have to understand something. I don't do things halfway. Got to go to practice. Talk to you later." So that was one of our conversations.
Wow.
The other one happened about 5 years after that. LT had a bar up in Jersey and he invited me up. And, back when we played, they would have gatherings at restaurants where we'd sort of rehash the game, and crowds would come in and ask questions. And so we're sitting there and they played the injury behind us. Neither one of us looked at it. And I turned to Lawrence and I said, "We're always going to be connected through this injury. We know how it affected me. It ended my career. How did it affect you?" And he said something very prophetic as I look at it. He said, "Joe, I learned a great lesson that night that no matter how great you are at what you do, it can be over in an instant. You can snap your fingers and it's over. And and every day you have to be the best you can possibly be, the best person you can be, the best competitor you can be, the best parent that you can be, the best partner you can be. You have to be the best that you can possibly be, because you don't have a guarantee that there's a tomorrow. And I thought that was extremely prophetic. And coincidentally, he became the Defensive Player of the Year in 1986. Not that was any reason, the inspiration through our conversation, but let me tell you something. He was one heck of a natural attacker. That's the
Wow.
best way to
Yeah.
describe him.
I saw some of the other films with him on it. So, and one last thing I just want to fit in about football before I touch on golf real quick and ask for what advice you'd have for athletes is um, what quarterback currently playing today would you say has the same traits that you view yourself that you kind of had like that? Because the way that you play football is different than how Peyton Manning played football. You ran a lot more than him. You were. I mean, back then it was a different game too. What quarterback would you say in today's current circumstance in the NFL or even XFL would you say fits your characteristics on some of the ways that you played?
Well, it's an interesting question, Jacob, because they're different guys with different styles. You're absolutely right. But the young man we have in Washington, Sam Howell, um, I watch him play. Not a big guy, about the same size as I was. We're not going to outrun people, but we're mobile enough to be able to put ourselves in positions to be able to get away from people. Our job is to keep the chains moving. I felt like I threw the ball down the field pretty darn well, and Sam throws the ball down the field pretty darn well. So from a size standpoint, from a mobility standpoint, I'd say right now, if I was looking at somebody that I would compare way I played the game, it would be Sam right now, right in my own backyard.
Interesting. Wow. Well, that's great to hear. I was thinking maybe you'd say maybe Kansas City or
Well, Patrick is so much taller and extremely creative. He's the one I enjoy watching
oh
more
yeah,
than anybody. I mean, but if you're going to compare someone, if I was going to compare someone to the way I played, it would be Sam. But Patrick, I call him. He's a video game. You never,
like playing Madden Mobile.
yeah, you just don't know. I mean, the creativity that he has and the athleticism that he has. And, Kansas City hasn't really hit their stride. Philadelphia hasn't hit their stride yet. These are two teams that were in the Super Bowl a year ago. I think right now, if you look in football, probably the best team is the San Francisco 49ers.
Interesting. Wow. And then kind of one last thing before I ask for your advice is you're a big time golfer. I believe you've golfed with when I talked to your wife on the phone, I believe you've golfed with Vice President Dan Quayle, who's also been a friend and appeared on the show before, and a lot of other people. Do you have a favorite golfing memory with maybe another player or a favorite course?
Um, I've had so many different experiences. One of my favorite experiences always in golf was when my dad was alive. I'd play with my father and my son. Now I play with my two sons. I just think it's a great way to spend a ton of time to be able to enjoy ourselves. Probably one of the most memorable walks I had was at the American Century Investment Golf Tournament in Lake Tahoe. I played with Mark McGuire and Michael Jordan, and just walking down the 18th hole and having, being around those guys. They're special. I mean, that tournament is such an incredibly special tournament. And American Century is a company that's based in Kansas City. And you talk about a benevolent company. They give away over 40% of their net profits to the Stour Institute in Kansas City for research. If anybody watching this that's in business, think of 40% of your net profits and you're giving it to charity. That's just how wonderful they are. So, I'm fortunate to be able to play with people and having a chance to play the game of golf. It gives you a great opportunity to really get to know people. In tennis, you're hitting the ball back and forth with people, but in golf, you ride in a cart with them or you walk on a golf course. And, golf is just a small part of the conversation that you wind up having. You talk about life, you talk about experiences, you talk about, things that you have done, but things more importantly, what they are doing and what they have done, and really get to know people.
For sure. And I just got to ask, since you said, you got to golf with Jordan and Tahoe, what was that experience like? Who
I
hit
just,
better that day?
Michael's a terrific golfer. And we sort of held our own. I'm pretty sure he beat me, but just being around and talking to him and visiting with him, getting to know him. The man, Michael Jordan,
He
which
played
is
in Washington too, briefly.
he
So,
was here with the our basketball team of the Wizards at that time. He was here for a little bit too. Yeah.
so yeah. And then kind of the last question I want to close with is what advice would you have? And let's just fit in your at the end college football prediction for who's going to win it all.
Well, what advice would I have regarding what? There's lots of things
Regarding
going.
athletes who are, you know what, I have quite a bit of college kids that listen to my show. So
Sure.
college athletes are trying to make it to the next level.
Yeah, I think first of all, you have to work hard. Number one, you got to hit your books. I mean, you can't just count on your athletic ability to carry you through life. I mean, the average lifespan of a professional football player is a little over 3.5 years. So if you come out of school, everybody's coming out early now, 19, 20 years old. So by the time you're 25, there's a good chance you may not be in this game. So what are you going to fall back on? I'd say get your education, hold on to the opportunity to get that education. And number one is don't be satisfied with just practicing the amount of time that a coach asks you to practice. You have to put in the extra work. The extra work is where you really separate yourself from other people, because truthfully, a lot of people don't want to do it. They don't want to put in the extra catches of the ball, or they don't want to put in the extra drops throwing the ball. They don't want to put in the extra hitting the dummy. They don't want to put in the extra weight work. And and you see the guys that are at the top of any game, collegiate game, professional game, they're the ones that separate themselves, and they
James
separate
Harrison in the
themselves
weight
through
room
hard
is a
work.
great example. What James Harrison did in the weight room all those years.
Oh, sure. Sure,
And
absolutely. I mean, but that's the advice that I would give, and enjoy it. Enjoy your college years. Have a great time. Get an education, enjoy the game, and let the chips fall where they may if the opportunity comes to get to the next level.
for sure. And then you got a national title pick for football. You think it's going to be this year? It's so hard because there's so many teams right now. There's a couple in the Pac-12, three in the Big Ten, two in the Big 12, and about three in the SEC that could potentially win. So 15 teams. Normally by now we know what 4 or 5 teams it might be. Where do you see
Yeah.
it going?
Georgia was at the top of up top of the heap, and they've struggled a little bit against Auburn. I think Michigan is a team that just nobody talks about, but they keep beating everybody by 25, 30 points. That's all they do, is they just line up and beat, whether they're on the road, whether at home, it doesn't matter. I'd be surprised. I don't know what the rankings are this week, but I'd be surprised if Michigan isn't number one in this particular week. I like the way, given the opportunity, and it may sound like a homer, but I like the way the University of Notre Dame is playing football. Pulled out playing Duke down there, who's a really good football team, then taking Ohio State right to the end of a game that, guess you could say could have gone either way, and Ohio State wound up winning. But, I think that there's somebody, Texas is another one. I mean, you look at the top 10, Jacob, it's a pick 'em, basically. The 1-win teams are going to have a chance. Is our team, all 5, 6 teams, going to go undefeated? I don't necessarily think so. But and Ohio State's a heck of a football team too. So I mean, I don't
Penn
really
State
know.
as well this year is a serious contender.
Who is?
Penn State.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, so when you sit down and you look at the top 10, you could say on a week-to-week basis, this one has a chance. How well are they going to play down the road? And also, can you keep your key people healthy? That's the same thing at the collegiate level that it is at the professional level. If you start losing offensive linemen, or you lose a quarterback, or you lose a running back, or you lose a D tackle, or a linebacker, or DB, or safety, it's going to change and affect what you do. Football is an interesting thing. You have starters and then you have backups. If you have to play against starters with more than, 1 or 2 backups, you got a problem, because
Sure.
there is a talent differential. And so I couldn't tell you right now, but that's what's going to make this year so much fun at college football. We just don't know right now.
For sure. Well, I appreciate you coming on the Jacob Buehrer Show today. I look forward to seeing what happens to the NFL and college football. Thank you so much.
Jacob, you're welcome. It's great joining you. Take care. Good luck.